It had been 3 long months since you and Logan, well, Wolverine, had started seeing each other. He wasn't the easiest person to be with. Grumpy didn't even begin to cover his perpetual scowl and bristling demeanor. But you didn't mind. Beneath all that roughness was a man who could be surprisingly gentle and maybe even sweet. When he let his guard down, those rare moments made it worth dealing with his occasional bouts of sulking or disappearing for days on end. Recently, though, something had shifted. The calls and texts were already sparse and had dwindled to nothing. He wasn't coming by like he used to, and when you tried to reach out, all you got was brief, cryptic replies like, busy, talk soon. You just chalked it up to his work with the X-Men, knowing how dangerous and unpredictable their missions could be. But it felt off. Something still felt off. You were sprawled out on your couch, staring blankly at the television when a sharp knock came at your door, startling you. A quick glance at the clock told you it was past midnight. Only one person would knock like that. You opened your door to find Logan standing there, looking rougher than usual. His hair was damp with sweat and his chest rose and fell heavily under his dark jacket. His face was flushed and his eyes were darting away from yours, like he couldn't bring himself to meet your gaze. "Logan?" you asked, concern lacing your voice. Are you okay?" you asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he just kind of brushed past you, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor as he stepped inside. "You gonna let me in or what?" he grumbled, but there was no bite in his tone. You're already in?" you replied, closing the door behind him. What's going on?" you asked. Logan shrugged off his jacket and tossed it into a nearby chair. You noticed his hands were trembling slightly. His usual confidence was gone. He was pacing the air like an unruly animal. But he finally sat down, sitting on the edge of your couch. "Long mission," he muttered, avoiding your eyes. "Right," you said, not buying it for a second. You walked over and sat down next to him for a second. You were careful to leave enough space so he wouldn't feel cornered. Logan wasn't great with his emotions, and pushing him really never ended well. "Logan," you said softly, "talk to me. What's going on? You've been avoiding me for weeks." His jaw clenched, and his fist tightened on his knees. He let out a low growl, more at himself than you. Damn it. I don't know. I don't know how to explain this, kid." You blinked. Kid. It was a nickname he used when he was trying to put some distance between the two of you. You leaned back, crossing your arms over your chest, scoffing. "Try me," you said. Logan glanced at you, his usually sharp blue eyes clouded with something that you couldn't quite place. He looked vulnerable. It wasn't a look you were used to seeing on him. I'm not myself right now," he finally said. His voice was strained. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" you pressed on. He groaned and raked a hand through his hair again, this time tugging at it in frustration. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," you repeated. Your tone was firmer this time. He stood abruptly, pacing again. "Look, it's not that I don't..." God, he cut himself off, his hands flexing at his sides. "It's just, I don't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" you echoed, your stomach twisting. "Logan, you'd never hurt me. What are you talking about?" He stopped pacing and turned to face you, his expression raw and conflicted. "That's the thing, darling. I ain't sure about it this time." The room was thick with tension as you just stared at him, trying to piece together what he was saying. He looked like he was about to come apart at the seams, his normally stoic exterior cracking in a way you'd never seen before. "Logan?" he said softly, standing and stepping closer to him. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. You don't have to go with it alone." But he shook his head, backing away from you like your proximity was too much. "No, you don't get it. I am alone in this." You blinked, stopping in your tracks, your heart racing. Why are you pushing me away?" He opened his mouth to respond, but closed it again quickly. The words were dying on his tongue. Instead, he turned and grabbed his jacket, heading straight for your door. "Logan, wait!" "It can't," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Not right now. I'll call you, okay?" Before you could even say another word, he was gone, leaving you standing in the middle of your room with questions seemingly left unanswered. You ran a hand through your hair, scratching at your scalp, frustration bubbling up in your chest. What the hell had just happened, and why did it feel like he was keeping something from you? Something really, really big. It had been a couple of days since Logan's abrupt departure. You hadn't heard from him, and the silence gnawed at your thoughts. What had he meant about not being himself? What was he afraid of? Just as you were starting to spiral, a loud, familiar knock at the door jolted you again. Heart racing, you rushed to open it. And like deja vu, there he stood, Logan, leaning heavily against the doorframe. His hair was wild and his shirt clung to his damp skin, and his usual rugged confidence was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked almost desperate. "Logan?" you asked, stepping aside to let him in. He hesitated, his gaze flickering to yours before stepping inside. As the door closed behind him, you noticed his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He looked like he was trying to hold himself together by sheer force. "I need to talk to you," he said. His voice was low and rough. You crossed your arms and leaned against the back of the couch. "I'm listening." Logan hesitated. Rubbing the back of his neck, his usual bluntness was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that made him fidget. "I've been avoiding you," he said. "Yeah, I've noticed," you replied, trying to keep the hurt out of your voice. "But why?" His jaw tightened and he let out a heavy sigh. "Because it's something happening to me." "Okay, what does that mean?" You pressed on. Your concern was growing more and more by the second. He started to pace around the room, running a hand through his hair. Finally, he stopped, turning to face you. "Look, darling, I'm in a rut." You blinked, unsure if you had heard anything correctly. "A what? Like the animal one?" "Yeah," he muttered, his cheeks flushing red. It's something that happens every once in a while because of this whole feral thing." You stared at him, processing. Of all the things you had imagined, this was at the very, very bottom of your list. It barely even made it onto it. "So, you've been avoiding me essentially because you're in, like, heat?" You whispered, not wanting to embarrass him too much. He winced at the term but nodded. "Yeah, and it's bad this time. I didn't want to be around you and lose control." The pieces began to click into place. His odd behavior, the sweating, the fidgeting, the tension radiating off of him. He wasn't just struggling, he was barely holding himself together. "Logan," he said softly, stepping closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" "'Cause it ain't exactly something you'd just bring up over coffee." He growled at you, though his tone lacked the bite. You smiled, placing your hands on his arms. "You don't have anything to hide from me. I'm not going anywhere." His eyes met yours in a flicker of vulnerability in their depths. "You don't get it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been fighting it every damn day, and it just keeps coming over here and taking what I want." He rushed to your face at his voice, but you didn't back away. You step closer and your hands are moving to his chest. "Logan," you said, your voice steady despite the pounding of your heart. "You don't have to fight it. I trust you." His breath hitched. "Don't say that unless you mean it." You leaned up, looking at him with your big eyes. Your lips brushed against his. It was soft and tentative at first, but he groaned and wrapped his arms around you. The kiss deepened, and his desperation spilled over as his hands gripped at your waist, pulling you flesh against him. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured against your lips. His voice was strained. Instead of answering, you kissed him harder this time, your fingers threading through his hair. "I can make you feel better," you whispered. Your voice was barely audible, but enough to make him freeze. Logan's self-control snapped. He growled low in his throat, his hands roaming your body, his lips on your neck again. He surged between the two of you. The intensity of his touch was overwhelming, but not really unwelcomed. You tugged at his shirt, your hands exploring the hard parts of his chest as he pressed you back against a wall. His lips trailed against your jaw, down your collarbone, leaving you breathless. "Tell me to stop," he rasped. His voice was thick with need. "Tell me to stop or I won't be able to." But stopping was the last thing you wanted. You pulled him closer, your lips finding his once more as you whispered against them, "Don't stop." The air between the two of you crackled with tension as Logan's hands gripped your thighs, lifting you effortlessly. You knew there was no turning back. Logan's hands were everywhere. Your waist, your thighs, your back. The sheer intensity of his touch left you burning. Every nerve alight with anticipation. His kisses were rougher and desperate, as though he'd been holding back for so long. You gasped when he pressed you against a wall, his body pinning yours. His lips left the blazing touch down your neck. His stubble was rough against your sensitive skin, but you didn't care. If anything, it made this sensation made your heart race faster than it ever had before. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to me?" he growled. His voice was low and gradual. You ran your fingers through his hair, tugging gently to meet his gaze. His eyes were darker than you'd ever seen them before, full of hunger and want. "Navy," you teased, though your breathlessness gave you away. "I'm okay with it." Logan's grip on your hips tightened as he buried his face in the crook of your neck, groaning against the skin. "You shouldn't be this calm about it," he muttered, though his hands roamed your body, saying he didn't want to stop. "Logan," you said, pulling his face up to meet yours. "It's you. I trust you." That seemed to break something in him again. He kissed you again, hard and demanding, his hands slipping under your shirt to explore the bare skin beneath. Every touch sent shivers down your spine. You couldn't help but cling to him. His warmth, his need, it made something within you light up. You lost track of time as he moved you to the couch. His strength was effortless. He settled beneath you, his weight and his presence was everything about him was overwhelming in the best way. His lips ghosted over your ear, his breath was hot against your skin. "If we're gonna keep going, I ain't gonna be able to stop," he warned, though his tone was more like a plea than a threat. You smiled, your hands resting on his broad shoulders. "Then don't stop," whispered, pulling him closer. Logan let out a low growl before finding your lips again, his hands wandering the last of his restraint. He gripped your waist as though he was afraid you might slip away. His kisses were rough and hungry. The tension between the two of you was snapping like a live wire. When he pressed against you, his body was flush with yours. You couldn't help but let out a small gasp. "I've been trying to stay away," he growled. His breath was hot and ragged. "I didn't want to lose control and hurt you." Your fingers slid into his hair, tugging just enough to make him meet your gaze once more. "You don't have to fight it, Logan." He froze, but he nodded, taking your words in stride. "You're playing with fire." Instead of answering, you just kissed him, slow and deliberate, pouring all of your reassurance into the gesture. His restraint crumbled, and with a low growl he deepened the kiss, his hands slipping under your shirt to grip your waist, his rough palm sending shivers across your skin.